Welcome to another episode of the Quiet Work Podcast. I'm excited for this one because Justin has been around the block, has been doing quite a few things. Very interesting, very curious to hear his story. So, Justin, why don't you introduce yourself and all the companies and journeys that you've been going through? Let's start there. We'll kick you out.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me, Matt. Excited to be here. I guess I started in my entrepreneurial pursuits as a kid. I think it was fueled by, I would sell lemonade and stuff on the corners. I just thought that was a good idea, just as a small kid. But my brother brought in some Tony Robbins tapes when they were actual cassette tapes into the house. This was the 80s. And I thought it was really neat that he just said, yeah, listen to these if you want to. And I loved it. I thought this was cool. This guy is just going insane, super passionate and very loud. And I thought, wow, that's a great, he's flying his own helicopter in himself to his own events. I'm like, whoa, that seems pretty awesome. So that maybe planted a seed of this could be a fun, like, I want to be my own boss. I'd love to have that kind of, I want to fly my own helicopter too. So that kind of fostered a desire of, and he's all about psychology and mindset and talking about what's going on in your brain and your mind and the decisions that you make and how that filters the life experience that you have. So I really like that. I got into it. As I grew, I got into college and took psychology courses. Didn't like those as much because it kind of was putting you into a path of therapy or social work and I did not like the direction that was going. So I, interestingly enough, at the same time, got a job in sales to pay for college. And I was pretty good at it. I had a knack for that. And I remember within like my halfway through my first semester, I was realizing like, I'm making as much money as my college professors. And I only work like 3 or 4 hours a day. So I was good, but I wanted to stick with school for a little while. I wanted to make sure, see what I wanted to do. And that's when my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, that was 25 years ago, plus, she got pregnant. And so that accelerated some of our plans to get married. And that sales job became kind of the way that I was feeding a family now, a young, growing family. But there was a bad side to it. And that was where the drugs and things came in. And I went through some addiction issues with opiates that were prevalent in that sales floor. And that was hard. That's the roughest thing to go through because there's a psychological component to it, and there's a biological, physiological component to that kind of an addiction that is just physically, it wrecks you. So that was a big time challenge. And I fought through that for years until I was compelled by the law, essentially, to take my commit. I tried to quit on my own dozens and dozens of times and never could just stick through it long enough. Didn't have the tools or resources to do that. And then I got into legal trouble with that, where the only option it seemed to try to get out of that situation without going to jail was rehab. So I fought as hard as I could to avoid that over the years up to that point. I'm like, okay, sign me up. Don't want to do jail. Got 2 kids now. I have stuff to lose. So I need to get serious about this. And that was just a pivotal, life-changing moment for me because all the psychology stuff started to click because it wasn't in a book. It wasn't general principles. It was a team of people that would work on me, with me, all about me all day long for 6 weeks. As an inpatient, all the distractions were gone. There was no bills to pay. It's just you dealing with your shit all day long. I think everybody should go to rehab because it's just fantastic. It really gets you to face and confront what's going on. And I made so many quantum leaps there in terms of just getting to know who I was, why I made decisions in certain ways, and why sometimes when certain things approached me, I would turn the other way and numb it and hide and all this stuff. So it was really cool. It began to really foster this systems framework way of thinking because instead of just being like ad hoc off the cuff, they were teaching me when stimulus comes in, pause and decide how you're going to respond. There's different routes that you can take and create. So that was really phenomenal. Then I got into business after that, after coming out of rehab. Society, my family, my spouse didn't really think highly of me because of the few years that preceded up to that, which is absolutely justified. I wasn't a great person for those few years. And so I wanted to kind of prove some of my worth. And I knew that I needed to pour something I need to pour myself into something and see if I could really, I guess I wanted to prove it to myself too. Like, do I really, can I do something big? And I just went all in on a business, and I was sleeping on my mom's floor at the time with my wife, with my 2 kids. I mean, not a good
Wow.
place for a fairly newly married couple to be. Things were not like really great on the home front in that regard, but I knew, and I'd learned in rehab, that I had to really go through this process and not have a scapegoat or somebody to blame for it not working out, which I always had in previous times of trying this or that or some, whatever thing I was into. And that began to work, after it was just stacking one brick slowly by myself alone, one brick on top of another. For a year, I did that and got revenues, for months. It was, I mean, $1,000, I think, was the first month of revenue, gross revenue. There was $0 to take out of that. So here I'm trying to go to work and I'm bringing home nothing to show for it. And that was hard to continue to justify and say, no, this is what I need to do. I have, we're sleeping on your floor of your mom's house. Like this stuff is not, it wasn't a great, easy situation to work through, but it's sometimes the mountain that makes the man, they say, like, and that was a mountain that I was having to climb now, having just come out of rehab. About a year later, a little over a year, revenues were in the high 6 figures, and it looked like I'd probably hit 7 that year, and it was going that way. And I started thinking, okay, this is working, this is good. And then I thought, man, if I'm running some numbers, which I'm not a great strong numbers guy, as the rest of the story will attest to, and looked like I might get to 8 within a year or two at this pace, like seeing the hockey stick growth start to take place, like, whoa. And that kind of scared me because I had this belief, like, I'm not good with numbers and the taxes kind of scare me. So with that growth going on, I thought maybe I'll just dial it back and kind of settle into a comfort zone here, because I'd probably be able to make 250 to 350 personally with that kind of number, just pull that much out of the business. I thought that's from coming out of jail and rehab, and now I'm pulling in 350. Like, this is a pretty good, thank you. This is awesome. But my clients at the time were like, we want somebody that's going to grow, and we want somebody that's going to help us grow. And so we'll find somebody else. And I was like, well, wait. Let me get back to you. So I realized I needed to either, like that saying, you're either growing or you're dying. Like that smacked me right in my face. I have to grow, or I literally will start to slide backwards fast, with some of my biggest revenue streams leaving overnight. So a little scared that it was becoming something I didn't even know how to manage at the time. I started turning to people that I started trying to figure out, like, what resources can I unlock to try to get to the next level? I gotta hire a bunch of people, man, hiring, payroll, like the management of people, the taxes, the tax returns that have to be filed on all these other people. I can't even file my own. Like, all this stuff started to feel overwhelming. And I brought somebody into the business that recognized me as a really a good mark for them, because I was so, like, scared and disinterested to be involved in the details. They're like, you just stay out there in the world where you're making all these deals come together, and we'll take care of all this for you. And I thought it was a great situation, but it was only great if I wanted to see the bank accounts ultimately drained and emptied. So, and it didn't happen overnight. It happened over the next 5 years. And
Wow.
little by little by little, and then the economy started to shift in 2009, 10. Things started to really get tight with the housing crisis things. And there was, I think, if I remember right, there was about $1.6 million in our operating account, the main account. And this is after a series of banks had gone down, and, banks weren't liquid. Like, there was a lot of stuff going on in these years. But I had this, even after all that I'd gone through, I was seeing, okay, there's still this money here. And with one transfer, it was gone. And I'm like, where did that get? Yeah, and this person who'd been so close to me comes into my home multiple times a week, eats with me and my family, and is so close. I was like, I moved it to some other account so it's safe, because if that bank fails with all that money in it, I was like, okay, that makes sense. And other people are like, that doesn't make sense, dude. No, it doesn't. Get your head out of the sand. So I did start thinking about it and started piecing things together. lo and behold, there'd been years of just siphoning this much, 20,000 here, 5,000 here. So with my head in the sand, because I wasn't good at numbers, I had nothing left, like a couple $1,000s at the end of the day. Um, so that was a bad kind of end to that story. That's that chapter. And then the worst part was the taxes were grossly understated from what our previous 5 years had actually been. And I just thought, he's filing them, they're taking care of it, it's all good. But it turns out if you don't report all the revenue that is coming in, then there's a lot more money that you have available to kind of swipe off the books, because then you're not paying it to the government, to taxes. So I had a choice to make at that point. Here I am with no money, no cash, liquid cash, and recognizing that I'd just kind of been really taken to the cleaners for this long game of a con that had taken me just down. And I realized that I have all these taxes that really responsibly they're under my name because I was the owner of the company. So I could either just pretend that it didn't happen and hope nobody ever looked, or I could file new tax returns and try to set it straight. And as my accountant and lawyer said at the time, they're like, and then hopefully you can just somehow pay it off for the rest of your life with the IRS. I was like, that sounds fun. Because it was
Wow.
millions of dollars in taxes. That was, I mean, we're not talking a little. And this is over the course of 5 years. So penalties, interest, it was all accruing by the day. Uh, so that started the next chapter, which was about 4.5 years of litigation with said parties to piece together I think we came up with 225 entities that they had set up just so this would get a little bit of this. I mean, the web was so complex that we never did get full closure. We don't even have, so that it was kind of like a PhD program in, oh, you don't like numbers? Well, here, you're gonna spend 4.5 years tracing dollars and emails around and piecing together the previous 5 years when you had your head so far in the sand, you didn't know what was north or south. And that's that. So
That's quite a story, let me tell you. Whoa, so many ups and downs here. First of all, appreciate the transparency for sharing the beginnings of it as well. And I can only one quote from Tony Robbins comes to mind: "Constant, the can I rule, or not the quote, a rule, constant and never ending improvement, the can I rule." So that's definitely a great example of that. So I hope that the right message at the right time will, right person, the right time will hear that message as well and will help them along the way with their journey if they're in that same boat. So many things I could resonate with. So long story short, after all that IRS situation and figuring things out with that, not a good partner, let's say, not a
mhm.
best partner you could have. What happened next? Did you start a new company completely from scratch, or were you able to try to figure things out and continue with that company? What happened next?
Yeah, I mean, without going into the gritty details, I mean, that 4.5 years was a really tough time.
Damn.
I didn't have money, and I had a small family. I had 4 kids now. The
Whoa!
fourth
Congrats.
I was just expecting the fourth when this all kind of came to a head. And so I had to figure out like how to process that mentally. And I recognized that I had to learn how to forgive. I had to learn how to move on. I learned meditation. I learned how to get into my mind and just quiet things at home and like because I was at risk of just losing it. I could have lost, there were, it was just a crazy
Like,
time to go
I
through all
don't
these.
see it at all.
Yeah. And so the outcome of the case was we were able to settle. I was able to pay the tax debt and clear my name, clear the obligations with the government, and button that up right before it was to go to trial. And it was a long fought one case turned into dozens of cases and just a really, really messy 4.5 years stretched out as long as they could possibly make it to really just wear me down and grind me down. There was a lot of grinding that was taking place. After that, and in the midst of that, actually, it was in the middle, maybe 2.5 years into that I had a friend call me and said, "Hey, don't you have guys that can do like payroll and set up entities and stuff?" And at the time, I mean, I had accountants on staff, and hired people. I'd settled with accounting firm that gave me a little bit of capital to keep the case going and pay legal fees. So I hired a few people. I brought an attorney on staff full time. Plus, I had an outside firm that was representing us. So my friend called and she asked me if I had people that could do that. And she's more of the visionary entrepreneur, like you would expect, just likes to build and vision things, but then the details, stay out of that. So I said, yeah, I mean, I guess we could probably do that for you. I mean, that's kind of a welcome. I was glad to hear from her because I'm not talking about a lawsuit and all this heavy, dark garbage. And so we set up a company for her. We got like EIN numbers and set up employee accounts and with tax withholdings, and we're filing the returns. And I was just charging her whatever time the team was spending. If they'd spend an hour filing a 941 return, they'd charge her for that hour at the cost. So she was stoked because she was able to just stay in her lane, building stuff. And it was just a little, it was a tiny little thing for these guys to do because it's what they do all day long. That's kind of admin stuff. And she told 5 or 6 of her friends and they started calling us. And so we're like, oh, okay. We decided to mark it up just a little bit, like charge your time plus 10%, let's make a little bit of a margin. And so those 5 or 6 people, they told friends. Within a year, we had 50 clients. I
Wow.
never set up a website, didn't have, zero sort of infrastructure for it. Well, we had the infrastructure, but we weren't trying to get business. And we had 50 clients that were doing payroll, bookkeeping, total outsource accounting, their full accounting staff, and just handling all the licenses and the tax returns. And so that was kind of fun because it's not, you don't see me hanging out in spreadsheets for fun, right? I don't, that's not where I go to have a good time. But our team was taking care of all that stuff. And I got to jump in with the owners and the founders and talk to them about some of the beliefs that they had around accounting. And here I am dealing with this lawsuit. And I'm like, guys, it's not that complicated. Trust me, you don't want to bury your head in the sand. And it was a fun way for me to have a little bit of variety in my life during this really dark time. And I really liked it. And that's what I realized. I like the coaching aspect. I like sharing. Like my mess can be a message that I pass along to somebody else and try to save them from an equally or potentially bad outcome like that. So yeah, that carried on for years. And then just last year, I sold out of the accounting business to my employees that have been with me for years. And now they run that. So we've kind of separated most of the admin and bookkeeping. We still have a couple clients that we maintained because they didn't want to make a change. But most of our clients went, and I just do the coaching side now. So we focus on that. And we get to use my story, my message, the PhD I have in litigation and mindset, and developed a program that I call the Freedom Flywheel method, where it's kind of cyclical. It's like the agile development process, and one of the companies that I was involved in was a software company. And not, again, you won't see me writing code for fun either. Okay. That's not my skill set. But I did learn a lot from the developers on our team. And agile development is where you build something fast and you iterate and then you learn. You don't try to get it right the first time. You don't try to get perfection the first time. You just do your best, with speed being a key. And so I started to apply that to our bookkeeping business, to our coaching business, to some of the other investments and companies that I was involved in after that I was able to bring some advice and expertise to a board or whatever role I was in, and realized that I no longer want to trade time for money. And after all this and building something up so big, there was clearly the lessons I'd learned from, just having your head in the sand and not paying attention and being asleep at the wheel and all these different things that were just so catastrophic for my situation. So those were easier lessons to learn, but I wanted to design life, really. I have these kids and I'd spend all this time. I was fortunately able to I was doing all this from my home. So I would take them to school in the morning. I would pick them up from school every day. So I was very much involved in their life. They just didn't know that while they were at school, I was sitting there reading a stack of legal brief papers like this, just going like, I don't want to do this anymore. So they would come home and I'd try to disconnect for a minute and I'd hang out with them. They'd go to bed and I'd go back and read more legal briefs for a couple hours, get up, do it again. 4.5 years. That was my life. So after that, I was like, no more. I'm not doing that. I'm going to go have some fun. So we moved to Hawaii actually on a whim,
That's nice.
and it was really nice. Like I had an idea, I thought about it one day, And I said it to my wife that night after we put kids to bed. I'm like, what do you think it would be like to live in Hawaii? Like now that I don't have this case to deal with anymore, like I think I want to go check it out and just see what the local life is like. She's like, all right, whatever. And so that to me was like a permission slip. And so the next morning I got up and I started calling people. Nobody in Hawaii. I lived on the East Coast. Nobody's awake. So I waited all the way through the day looking things up. I called a few people. I'm like, I want to move in as soon as possible. Like, could you have any condos available? Like, yeah, what are you thinking? Maybe like next year? I'm like, I mean, like next week? They laughed at me. I like 6 people laugh at me like, are you insane? Kind of. Yeah. And then I called one and said, okay, do you have any condos? I want to move in soon. And by soon, I mean, my pitch kind of got better because this is call number 7. Is there anything that you have that you could make work if I want to come like right away? And I said, well, I hear it like typing. Would you be willing to move from one condo to the other? I said, let's start with 6 months. And then maybe if I like it, we'll go another 6 months. We'll see. But I want a 6-month term. I'm like, okay, let's see. Yeah. But well, would you be willing to move? Like I have one, but you'd probably have to move like 3 months through to the other. I'm like, it's in the same building? Like, yeah. I'm like, I don't care. I'm bringing like a suitcase. Yeah, I'm going to Hawaii. It's not like I'm bringing coats and shit. You know what I mean? This is cool. So they're like, yeah, we could do it. And if you're willing to move, we could give you a little discount. I'm like, done. Let's go. So I said, what do you need? They said, well, wire a deposit. And here's the wire instructions. And so I went downstairs. I'm like, hey, Kim, we can go, like, we could be there in 1 week's time. She's like, 1 week? Like, you said you were down with the idea. So let's go. And then we just started going. It's
Wow.
calling the school. It's figuring out how to check them out of school. Can we get them out? Can we put them in homeschool? Going through all these different things. And then we had a dog. We couldn't take the dog. So I got my sister to come and stay at our house for 6 months and live there. Took care of our dog for us. And we were off to Hawaii. 7 days later, we were living in Hawaii for the next
Wow.
6 months.
What
So
part of Hawaii?
Maui.
Maui. Okay, that's one of the nicest places there.
Yeah, it's my favorite. I
Yeah.
love it.
Wow. So were you homeschooling there in Hawaii, or you
Yeah,
also?
we were doing all kinds of enrichment things. Like we tried to work with the school, and that's when I started to realize schools and the government bureaucracy. I had all the principals and everybody were on board with the plan. They're like, we think this is great. This is a great chance for your kids to go experience a whole new culture. But the superintendent wouldn't excuse the absences. So I even went, Matt, all the way up to the state prosecuting attorney because the superintendent of the school system told me that if I took my kids out for that period of time, that it would be unexcused absences and she would be required by law to recommend me to the state prosecutor for, I don't know, neglect and truancy. And that, she listed a few things. I was like, you got to be shitting me. I'm taking my kids. So I called the prosecuting attorney and they're like, look, man, I don't really care about what you're doing with your kids. I got kids that are in drug abuse situations with parents that are abusive. Like, you want to take your kids to Hawaii for 6 months? Fuck off. Go. That's so I was like, okay, we're good. So I ended up I did officially pull them out and put them into homeschool. But what we tried to do is, we went and spent 4 days at Pearl Harbor as part of it while we were there. So we went over to Pearl Harbor and we had the kids do reports on things like that. We learned how to meditate together. Like I was meditating before that in the kid. I'm like, I'm going to teach you guys meditation. So we found somebody that did meditation. We lived in the same condo complex as Wayne Dyer, who is I don't know if you know him. He's now passed, but he was a New York Times bestselling author, a lot of mindset stuff. Well, I mean, we'd hang out with him in the hot tub and he would talk to my kids and he would talk to my daughter about becoming a writer. He would have workshops and things where 2,000 people are flying into Hawaii. And he's like, hey, why don't you come? Why don't you guys just come with me? Let's go up there and grab a couple of chairs and we'd sit there. So we had these cool experiences. We learned about Hawaiian culture. We learned about, it was just so awesome. I've told people that the coolest thing about that is that 6 months felt like 3 years to me because we didn't have the habits. We didn't get up and go sit at a desk and do that, like where time just seems to fly by. Time actually seemed to go slow because we designed our days, we designed our life. And that's what started to set me up for the next chapter. I feel like in building something that I could create levels of different freedom because I love to build, I love to work on things, but I don't like to be stuck in an office all day, every day. I like we were talking about beforehand. I like being able to be in the desert. and then hop on a plane or get in a car and go 2 hours and go snowboarding, and then go back to where it's warm or go jump in the ocean. Like that kind of change, like invigorates me, it makes me feel great.
I love it. Are you now would you recommend homeschooling because of that experience? You have a comparison between, regular normal school or maybe private school and homeschooling. So what's your take on that? It's a very personal question, but I'm curious to
Yeah.
hear you.
Yeah, if you have the chops for I mean, I wouldn't, but I think you should because then I mean, I'm not a great teacher of kids. Like I'd rather be a coach than a teacher. And so I try to work with my kids more as a coach because I've gotten better and better at coaching. And that's kind of the role that I've slipped into here. And so being a teacher with curriculum, deadlines, tasks, that's less my speed. And because it was a short period of time and we had so many enriching opportunities, I feel like it was great for the kids. But if it was up to me, like to teach them arithmetic and geometry and geography, like that's just not, I some of those things I don't know that I really believe in the value. I know that learning complicated math equations and things like that can help with problem solving skills, but unless you want to work at NASA or become a Wall Street, like I don't really get it myself. So it's hard for me to say, son, you need to get this complicated calculus program done that is way above my head. I can't even think about it, but you better do it. So but I do think the environment could be better. But if you're going to do homeschool, like the concern is to me, how are you going to balance that social aspect that kids need to develop socially? And we saw that with COVID back east, is it was a major stunting factor for emotional development and social development when my kids started to feel more comfortable in a mask than outside of a mask. And that's when I'm like, okay, we're moving. We're out of here. That's
Yeah.
it's not healthy. You don't want to hide from the entire world. You don't want to show your face like we got to go do something different.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, that's interesting. We still have a little bit of time before we do that. We'll see what will be the final decision here. She's just 8 months now, first one. So
Yeah.
we have some time to decide, but it's moving so fast. I mean, it's almost, it's approaching first year and it feels like a few weeks. So
I
time
know.
flies like crazy. So we'll see if we can still have to make that
Here's the
executive.
thing. I know it's very cliche, but you really need to enjoy these moments because now I have kids that are 23. She just turned 23 yesterday, actually. Um,
Decision.
and a 21-year-old who just turned 21 a couple weeks before that, a 17-year-old and a 14-year-old. When you get kids at that age, there's these little ages that you have now where you really, I mean, people told me all the time, I was like, yeah, whatever. So, enjoy it while you can, enjoy it while it lasts, because it just becomes different. And it's not that it's better or worse. They're just different. You have different problems. You have different, 23-year-olds are solving different problems. They're dealing with different things. And it really shows you where you screwed up when they were little too. So, oops, So you've got to kind of figure out how to correct that because, I came from a great family and there was 9 of us kids and yeah, it was huge. So there's always just chaos and it was nuts. But my parents were phenomenal. But there was never really a lot, there we were not rich. We did not have a lot of resources. So I always thought I wanted to give my kids the opportunity to recognize that they could do anything. So we moved to Maui. And then after Maui, we went and traveled Europe for 6 months with no plans. We'd just jump on a train and go somewhere else. And then we'd stay there until we got tired of it. And then we go somewhere else. And then we literally no plans in advance.
Yeah,
And
that's what I love. That's what I want to for my kids as well. Well, planning, we definitely want to have more. We'll see how that obviously will develop, God willing. But yeah, that's what we come from Europe, so I miss Europe. I would love to spend more time in Europe, probably maybe even more than 6 months during a period where when they kind of get it, so they can get the culture a little bit more. Languages, I would love them to learn faster more languages than I do, and I would love to learn with them. Continue to learn languages. English is my third language, so I definitely want to continue adding more languages to my skill set, and one for them as well. We were actually even funny that you say that, or you shared that your story, but we were even thinking maybe down the road spend some time in Hawaii and learn the culture and then we had good times there. So I loved it there. Maybe somewhere else. So we'll see. We'll travel a little bit. or a lot. And if we would, we'll see what the alternatives or the best route will be. I have a kind of mixed feeling so far. I hear mixed feedback. It sounds like there's a big change. You're joining the info space or info or online education space as well, so you know it firsthand. But it feels like there's a big change to the universities, to the educational system. I had the pleasure, or not pleasure, but an opportunity to see the educational system in Poland, in Germany, a little bit in the United States, not a lot, because I was already pretty much um, finished my high school in Europe. But here I had just some friends and family members that were going through this, so I was able to learn about that. But yeah, I feel like there's a huge change happening in front of our eyes with AI now, even greater. So we'll see how that's going to develop. But like you said, I would love to for our kids to experience like so many different things that I wish to experience when
Yeah.
I was growing up, and kind of grayish area era of in back in Poland in late
Mhm.
90s and in
Mhm.
2000s was interesting times for sure. But yeah, to your point, I love that. I'd love to differ
I
them.
would say I remember when I was doing a lot of this, I had family members that were saying, "No, wait, your kids are too young. They won't appreciate everything they're getting to see right now." But I'm so glad I didn't listen to them because as they get older, then they need like matriculate into their own lives and their own schools and their own habits and routines. So we did it when my oldest was maybe like 10, 11, 12, 13 in those years. And so it was before things really started to get stable and set in her ways. And maybe, that there's pluses and minuses to it, but it would have been virtually impossible for us to do with older kids, just to try to get everybody's schedules to align and everybody's to match up. So I'm glad we did it with younger kids. And I think the other thing to be mindful of and trying to that I've learned since is in trying to give my kids like an open mind, like a growth mindset that anything is possible. If you can dream it, you can achieve it. And that's truly you've just got to be able to dream it and see it clearly in your mind. And then anything is possible. But what I failed to do is let them work through some of their own problems as a result of that. So I kind of put a mask on that of, oh, you're having problems. Let me help you through that problem so you can keep dreaming bigger. But what I deprived them of is their own problem solving skills for their own abilities to work through things where they became more reliant on mom and dad to step in. And so that gets harder as kids get older because now the problems they're dealing with that they have to work through on their own become a little bit more severe. Like they're a little bit more, the stakes are higher, right? So you've got to let them, you've got to let them deal with some of the stuff down there at the younger ages, but also balance that with, I'm glad that again, that we did all those travels. We did the things we did because my phone gives me this little memory from yesterday because it's my daughter's birthday. And so it knows and everything. So it gives me a video. And I'm seeing all these videos of like Paris and Ukraine and like all these places the Hawaii, all these things that we've been in different places for her birthday, Iceland, Norway. And I sent her that video and I'm just like, that's awesome. Cause I don't know of any other 23-year-old that could put together that collage of that kind of a life. Hopefully, knock on wood, that helps them in the long run to see that they can do anything. And she, my oldest is a great kid. She just finished college. So I know what that college system is like. I know how expensive it is and how
Yeah,
much money we paid just so she can go she's a music teacher now. And she landed a great job, but there's a lot of cash to pay to get this piece of paper that I'm working with a guy out of Australia who's 16 years old and is buying ads and making probably almost 7 figures a year. And I'm like, okay, I just paid like $200,000 for my daughter to go to college to make 35 grand a year. And this kid is hustling, is probably making, mid to high 6 figures take home. And he just decided to drop out of high school, like,
yeah.
so
I
it's
feel
interesting.
it's interesting times right now. You'll see this more. You had that with the crypto wave. I
Yeah.
hear he did buy ads. You say like
Yep.
ads. Yeah. So that was ecom boom. We had already one or two ecom booms. So crypto
Mhm.
booms, and now you have the SaaS AI kind of boom
Yep.
where you can create SaaS without even knowing how to code and monetize it right away. I mean, it's it's fascinating, definitely, and inspiring to see. I entered my 30s to see those not even 20-year-olds, like you said, teenagers crushing their mindset, their ability to adapt to the time. Obviously, one thing they have that we don't have anymore is that baggage that
Mm.
obviously you can't just
Yep.
forget. And obviously, it's changes you, it influences you for
And
sure.
when you're that young too, you don't I mean, I see it when I saw it yesterday. I was on the freeway and a motorcycle went by. I was doing probably 90 miles an hour and a motorcycle flew by me like I was standing still. And I just knew that's probably like a 16 to 18-year-old kid on that motorcycle because I would have done that dumb shit at 16 to 18 because you feel like you're bulletproof, right? So I know
Exactly.
I sound really old saying this kind of stuff, but when you apply it to like these kids that I'm talking about that are buying ads and bringing in six figures, you just the filters, the limitations, like you said, the mindset, they don't have that fear. So they just plow through. They fail and it's like, okay, I'm trying again. Where 40-year-old fails and they're like, dear Lord, I'm ruined. No, you're not. You just try again. Like take a page out of these guys' book. They try. Nope, not the outcome. They go again. So
I love that because I'm reading the book Anti-Fragile. Fragile. Not sure
okay.
if you read that book, but
Yeah.
it's quite an interesting book. I'm taking my time with it, and those are the things that he talks about that as entrepreneurs, we should be doing that collective failing more often and actually bring it to the awareness. Because if you fail, someone else will not have to fail the same way you failed. And if they fail and they have to fail, it's just inevitable. You have to. You just like you said, and those teenagers and people in their 20s that are going through that, a lot of them, well, like you said, we'll just brush it off. They fail. There's just another way of not how not to do something and just move on and do it and do it. And that's a beautiful mindset that like I didn't grow up with that mindset. Like if you fail, your whole family look at you like you said when you went out of rehab. They look at you, they put you down. No one everyone questions you, everyone doubts you, like no one actually wants you to succeed. And if you then figure out a way out of it and succeed, that's even worse. Then they stop talking to you, they talk behind your back, and it's all that cycle that it's really, really hard to like block, mentally block, right? Especially if those are people close to you or were close to you at one
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
yeah, that's super inspiring to see that they don't have the baggage and they just go through life, and that's how they create those crazy companies. And now you have to pay attention to that. I mean, it's normal to speak to a 20-year-old who's doing deals with multi nine figures or even 10-figure businesses because he has the skill set that they don't have. No one on their team that went through college, university, and MBAs and freaking doctorate. They
Yep.
will not learn what he was able to learn in the last 6 or 12 months sitting in his parents' bedroom, figuring things out, learning through YouTube, maybe investing into courses, programs, coaching that costs a friction of what a university degree will cost him for his parents. And yeah, that's quite interesting times to be alive. I don't think we ever had it in
I know. I
history.
think it's fascinating. I love it. I saw a clip by Gary Vee a couple of days ago and I sent it to my son who's 21. And it was Gary Vee talking to this guy that just left. He got out of college and he got a degree in film. So he wanted to make movies. It was what I took away. And here he was unemployed living with his parents, I believe, and not unable to put this expensive degree to use, right? So he starts DMing all the restaurants in his city. And he said he literally DM'd every single one of them. And the way he started was, let me make you a video in exchange for a gift certificate to your restaurant. I'll just work for food. And now he runs $1 million agency making short form videos for businesses all over the world. And I just
Sweet.
thought, that's cool. That is so cool. That's why I shared with my son because that didn't exist 10 years ago. That didn't exist. Sure, as hell didn't exist 20 years ago, where you can do these little things, just creating content with the device that everybody has in their pocket right now. And you can create that content. You can share that story where your mess becomes a message that inspires others. And then you can refine and hone in on that skill set because the reach is just so wide with And it doesn't matter the following size as much anymore. You know, the algorithms are changing, and you can just, if you create a good piece of content and you get the reps in, then you have the opportunity to serve other people, and other people will pay for that service. And it's
Yep, it's
cool.
all interest based, not more no more follower
Yeah.
based. That's the biggest algorithm change there, and I love it. Yes, absolutely, put it to use, and I think everyone should do it, especially if you go that traditional route and you have a degree. Like document your journey and just
For sure.
put content out there. Just you and I try to explain it to all of the family members who are going through it in Poland, but their mindset is still not there, and it's
Yeah.
so like, just don't expect anything, just post it out there. You're doing it anyway. Like, why wouldn't you do that? And
Yeah.
they're so talented. They're just that imposter syndrome. I have that
Mm,
thing. It reminds me about the imposter syndrome that it's no longer needed. I don't have the threat that someone is going to attack me and take my life and my family's life. And especially if you're doing something online, it's it's definitely very, very difficult. But for some, but I know that there's so much benefit, so much upside from it, from documenting your journey, talking about your expertise, especially if you actually spend years,
mhm.
perfecting your skills. Like, why not just share it publicly? Let's switch over to your coaching side. So who do you typically work with? How does the process look like? If you can share a little bit more behind that, like what are the informations that your clients and
So I got to
customers.
just finish up with content because I'm a believer in it now. And I didn't even have Instagram until 2024. This is the first time I downloaded and logged into the app. And now I have hundreds of videos out there. Like I've been really
Yeah,
putting
sorry.
energy into getting better at that. And now I'm telling my kids because it affects everything. Like my middle son wants to go into college and play baseball. And I'm like, make content. You got to post. You got to post 2, 3 times a week. And he's like, I can't post that much. I'm like, post that much. And then I'm getting him to do it sometimes. And some of them get like 1.8, okay, like 2,000 views. I'm like, there's some coaches that are seeing that. And then lo and behold, the coach calls and is like, hey, I saw you. I want to have a call. Let's have a meeting. So it creates opportunities even in those ways that is, it's,
Always
oh,
hiring, be hired, like you said, starting, company, or even your oldest one that she went into teaching music. I mean, why not teach thousands of people on top of what she's doing right now? And maybe, down the road, she will start a school coaching program for even for free. If she's
yeah.
gonna have thousands of people that, are very closely following her, I mean, it's so easy to monetize afterwards. So just and you can at the same time, if if you don't want to monetize, some people are afraid of it, whatever, then you can like I said, you can build relationship and teach thousands instead of hundreds or
Yeah. Well,
tens.
what if she doesn't monetize, but she has 50,000 people that come and check out her tips on how musical stuff. And then she wants to apply for a job at some prestigious university and she's Mrs. Music. Like, it's if she's the one that creates that sort of perception and brand online, do you think
Absolutely.
that's going to make a difference in who is selected for that role?
Oh,
Yes,
and you're a
100%.
media company. A university are getting smart with that too, and they will pay her to reach out to do a shout out on their Instagram to show
True.
joy to the people.
Yeah. So with our coaching, what we do here, is we work and service is kind of our niche. And it's usually between about 250, 300,000 in revenue up to 3 million is kind of our sweet spot in that range. Typically it's that range because that's where we find the best kind of ROI for founders that are stuck in, and we were talking a little bit about this. It's kind of seeing the hiring process wrong. It's kind of like my own story. I'm growing to a certain point, and then I hit this place where it's like there's this ceiling on me where I don't really have the capacities to break through, because breaking through means new tax documents. It means new entity structures. It means new, like I got to be doing so many things. That's kind of a complicated analogy. So I'll often say, like, think of a baker that's baking cookies. So if you know how to make really good cookies and those cookies make people happy, then you have enough people that are like, you should sell these. These are so good. I just love them. So you hear that and you're like, okay, maybe I'll try it. So you're in the kitchen, you get the little baker's hat on, you get the apron, you're making cookies and flowers going all over the place, sugar and everything. You're doing your thing. You're practicing your craft, and then you grow, and then more people want the cookies, more people want the cookies, more people want the cookies because you're good at your craft, right? You grow, you hit the ceiling right here. And that ceiling is your capacity ceiling, is what I call that. Because all of a sudden, the business now requires you to spend as much or maybe even more time out of the kitchen than you were spending in the kitchen. And then that starts to suck. It starts to feel bad. It starts to feel like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And, you go from being like all excited with cookies to like, you kind of slump over your desk. You're like, great, I got to spend the next 6 hours at my desk and it's 7 p.m. right now. So that starts to take the wind out of your sails, and that's where you'll sabotage things and you'll start to kind of undermine your performance. Kind of go up to the ceiling and then you kind of come back down because you're focused on admin work. You're focused on stuff that has nothing to do with why you got into business to begin with. So I usually see those problems really hit fever pitch between 300,000 and 3 million bucks. And that usually over that, people have kind of burst through that level where they realize how to hire people. The sequence, that's key for hiring people. A lot of people down on this two, three, four, $500,000 level, they think, man, I need an operator. Like I need somebody as good as me that can get in there, but do the details. Like, no, you don't. That's a bad idea. So I'm telling you guys right now, don't do that. That's a mistake. Start with a different process. Start lower on the totem pole, so to speak. You start down in the base level of administration and you start delegating those things that you can, which gives you more awareness. It gives you the ability to manage other people, and it gives you time back to put into the kitchen again, where you can do, where you get the best ROI, the best return on your investment. So I work with people through a process that I call the Founder Freedom Flywheel, because it's cyclical, like that agile development process, where you start with mindset and then you build some systems around that. And then you rotate through for some effective delegation. So we do it systematically. So it's not one big magic bullet, that we're not trying to solve everything with this magical CEO hire we're trying to bring in. We do it one step at a time. You go through this cycle. It takes a couple of weeks. You go through, you now have a new system in place. You now have it's really reliability. You can expect certain outcomes from doing this once. And that outcome might be, hey, I got 6 hours of my time back. If I could give you 6 hours next week, so everybody else gets 40 hours to work, but you get 46, but it felt like 40, that's it. That's a kind of a good win. That's a pretty good, what could you do with that? So I would say I would get a massage for one of those. Okay. And then for the other 5, I'm going to go do something that only I could do that nobody else in this building knows how to do, because that's where I'm going to get the most leverage to build a bigger business. And again, it's kind of back to my story of designing the life that you want, and most people they're in a business and they feel, especially at that level, that 2-3 million, under 3 million range, they often feel trapped because they have a level of success. But when you mentioned your family in Poland, I thought of this because it's like when you lean into growth, if you want to teach them to use social media and content to help grow, they lean into something and it kind of feels like painful. And that idea just makes you want to turn around and face the other way. And I would say that one of the things that I work on with people is reframing that entirely, so that you look at that discomfort as a signal for what you actually need to do, because that's telling you you're leaving this comfort zone that you've been in for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And when you go through this, it kind of feels like you're going up with a knife against your throat, right? It feels like, I can't go forward. But if you reframe it in your mind and recognize that every time you've grown, you've felt discomfort, you've felt uncomfortable. If you go to the gym and you work out to get in shape, you can't just do what's easy. That will do nothing for your body, right? You have to push past that comfort zone. So that feeling of discomfort that your relatives share when it's like, you should make content. Oh, no, that's because that is the area that they could grow. Probably, maybe the most, I don't know if it's the most, but it could be a significant area of growth for them. So that feels very terrifying in most cases.
Yeah, it does. And, I like to see this as investing your time and money and effort. I mean, usually it's mostly time because, like you said, you don't need a red camera from Hollywood to record a video nowadays.
Yeah.
Investing into your equity, you're building equity with that, because nowadays, and you're actually building equity because if you look at and study any of the mergers and acquisitions that are happening, I'm not talking about $1 billion acquisitions, publicly traded companies, but on a smaller scale, anywhere between 500,000 and 100 million, let's say. It's a
Yeah.
big gap, but obviously there's a lot of mergers that happen there. Having that essentially content system, systematized way of getting attention in 2025 and beyond, it's a big part of the valuation that you're going to get from your business. And of course, it helps with cash flow if you know you don't have to worry about next client, where the next client is coming from. If you have that content, especially if you have a skill, a craft that you're really good at and you love doing that, then that's absolutely a equity building activity here. And I'll make sure to share that episode with those that I had in mind, and they will know that I had them in mind, because that's definitely going to change their life. And it takes time. It's obviously not going to happen overnight. Nothing good happens overnight. But
Yes.
if you build, you put in the effort into it, there's really a small margin for failure here if you continue to do it and show up for that. And like I said, the biggest thing is building equity. So it's not like you're going to waste all of the time and nothing will work
Exactly.
out.
And you got to take a balanced approach to it too. And so when we're coaching people through that, it's part of what we help them work through. You still need to work on what matters most. You got to work on there's a theory of constraints in a book called The Goal that Jeff Bezos has all of the Amazon execs read. It's one of the required readings for anybody. And that theory of constraints talks about there's businesses is just littered with, if you have a business, you have 1,000 problems right now, any given time. You're just going to have them. So that can feel overwhelming, but the theory of constraints says, what is the problem that is blocking you from a level up? Like, is there a revenue problem? So an analogy is, if say you have a factory that makes cars and you can produce 4 sets of wheels every day, 3 engines every day, but only 1 chassis every day, so your constraint is chassis. Don't think about the wheels, for hell's sakes. Those are okay. First get 4 or 5 chassis a day off the assembly line. Then go back and say, all right, now where are we constrained? And so it's a forcing function to bring the field narrower and bring the ideas for what do I need to work on now? And so content might not be something that is super high priority, but if you focus on what matters most, and then you give yourself a standard to live by, like, okay, I'm going to record 1 video every day, or I'm going to review my goals 3 times every day. Like, these little things that are no net adds to your time, but can really move the needle with your mindset by getting some reps in. That's where we can really bust through some of these levels that people are stuck at and get them through, where that ceiling now becomes the new floor. So now, instead of them bumping their head here, it's like, oh, wait, my standard is here now. That's what I will accept as a minimum. And now I've got a new ceiling that's higher up. And
The
then,
new
well, again,
summit. Yeah. The new summit. And it's I was watching a video recently from a very successful guy. Actually, he's from Poland as well. And he talked about what you just covered. So imagine you can't figure out how to run or get consistent with running, for the analogy here. It's easy to imagine, right? You have to get up in the morning or do it up before you go to sleep, which is usually the worst time to go running. I've done both, and I'm not a runner really, but I always, like, there's periods of time where I force myself to do that. But then imagine somehow you challenge yourself for a little bit and you figure out how to run half a marathon or a marathon. All of a sudden, running 1 to 5 miles is nothing for you because you change your perspective on things. But obviously, you had to get extremely uncomfortable for a bit of time. And I'm not saying go run a marathon and half a marathon, but that analogy he applied to business as well. Like you said, the new ceiling, new level that becomes your floor, new floor, like you said. And also there is one thing that I found really interesting concept, that business is a constant game of zooming in and zooming out. You zoom
yeah,
in, you find out, hey, the chassis, we only have one a day. We need to figure it out. And you build a system around it. You hire the right person to do that, by
yep,
machines in that case, to
yep.
optimize the process. And then you can zoom out again and observe, all right, what's the next goal that we need to figure out? What's the next thing that we need to optimize? And then you zoom in again and then you zoom out. I think this is a perfect analogy of how businesses are ran. Yeah,
But that's
that's
that's something that we work through in coaching too, because a lot of times people, especially if they've been in business for 20 years, these long running businesses, there's a lot of habits that have been built up and they don't ever get the zooming out part. That's the short version is they're so in the middle of it and everything flows through them. So they're the bottleneck and they never get the perspective and the distance. And that's part of what we kind of coach through on the mindset side is we got to get you out so you can look down at the business from a different perspective. And then from that perspective, you can make some changes and suggestions and modifications that you'll just see it differently. And so I do that with goal setting. I go through an annually, my wife and I leave and we go out of town. We turn it into kind of a fun thing where we go out of town in January when it's a little colder. We find a fun place to go for a week and we just really, we buy a calendar of the whole year. It's like this big, 4 feet, 5 feet, and we stick it on the wall in the hotel. And then we start marking the dates that are important. Like, so we started this year with my my daughter's college graduation. It's like everything needs to hinge around that because that's our first priority is getting the whole family together to support her. And then we started putting things like baseball tournaments and birthdays. And all of a sudden this map starts to get filled in and it looks like a map. It's a
Okay.
map for our year. Okay. And then from that, we kind of go into the next phase, which is taking our long-term goals and vision and trying to say, okay, now what's important for us this year? And we kind of break that into a process of coming up with a list. We shoot for like 8 to 12 things that are kind of like our main priorities for the year. And then we make that a list. And that list we review 3 to 5 times every single day. But quarterly, we leave and we bail out, we zoom out, like you said, and we go to a hotel or somewhere like an Airbnb that we usually will go for 3 days, 4 days, like just a long weekend. And that gives us enough time to just eject from the system. Like we get out of all the details of the kids and the business and all the nuts and bolts. And we look at it from a different perspective. And every quarter we make shifts and adjustments and we recognize like that goal's not important. That's not, or if we spend another hour on this one, that's just taking time from these. And these are way more important than that one. So we just take it off the list and we put a reminder to think about it in next January when we go off on our next trip. And that practice has been transformational because we build it into our calendar. And because of that, so actually, as soon as we got the college graduation on the calendar, the next step is all of we call them quarterly retreats. So we put those on the calendar next. And then from there, we started adding people's birthdays and different events. And that built in gives us a forcing function to zoom out, which is hard sometimes to zoom out. And I'll tell you, I've been doing this a little longer than she has. And sometimes when we do this, it takes her a full day to like get in the mode of what we're actually doing. She's like, no, I'm going to go out and go to dinner and go shopping. I'm like, no, we're not here to have fun. We can't have fun. I'm just saying the goal here, like we got to get into the goals. We got to get into the details. We got to get into that gear. And after a day of just kind of, it feels weird because we're in the details and then we start zooming out. And by the end of that first day, it's like really there was one that just came up our last quarterly retreat. We were thinking about building some homes on some property that we have and working on a rental property business. And there's a lot of government stuff to work on. There was a lot of this. And as soon as we put that up and brought it out, it was like, what the hell are we doing? That is such a distraction right now when we have these other things that are so much more important. And it was so clear. So, but just the week before, she had spent like 5 hours working on that. And then she's talking to me about it. I'm like, there's no sense for us to do that. And that's what we see with my clients all the time. When we distill the things their time actually goes towards, and then we get that perspective zoomed out a bit, there's always about 5, 6, 8, 12, sometimes a lot more hours where they're like, what is the point of that? But the habits, like you said, if you don't zoom out to go, you don't do this process, you're running on autopilot. And a lot of those habits, they're even undermining you, if not just not contributing to your overall plans.
I love that. We're going to save so many marriages with this, Justin.
It's awesome. It really is awesome.
I will implementing that. I came across last year, I believe, something we called, I don't know if this was the name of it or I just throw it out there. We called it live dinner method, where we would meet. Well, once a month, we would actually intentionally sit down. We eat all of the meals together for the last, since we got engaged even before that. So 7 years, 8 years now. But with this one, we are a lot more intentional, where we talk about three pillars of, good life, if you will: fitness, so health, business, and relationship. So those three pillars, and that's somewhat what you just described here. And those are the three pillars. And here, when we show up to this meeting, there's no judging, no getting angry, no emotions involved, ideally, which is not easy sometimes. So I make sure that you're not too tired or too hungry to talk about that. It's obviously different, a little bit more difficult and different now with the 8-month-old around. So we have to find times where she's asleep and we're not way tired, right? So that's another challenge here. But yeah, that helps us to really zoom in and zoom out quickly within that couple of hours that we do. And we'll probably start, like you said, to take your advice here and start traveling, and maybe do this like quarterly, and then once a year map out, be a little bit more prepared. That wasn't our skill set at all for the last couple of years.
It's a really good practice. I think if with you having that kind of a basis to work off of, if you build in, and I mean, I can show you my calendar. In fact, next week I have on the calendar stretch goal, and so my wife and I meet once a week. We have a weekly meeting where we get together because she oversees some of the rentals and real estate and different things that we have going on outside. That's kind of her lane. I help support her in that, but that's where we come together and we have a lunch meeting once a week. And one of the reviews that we do is the calendar. What are we doing this week? What's going on? And so I looked at the calendar. I'm like, oh, our stretch goal is next week. And she's a big F1 fan. So F1 will be in the Netherlands next week. And then the week after that, Italy. And we had put on the goal list back in January that if we hit certain financial targets, that we would take a middle of the year stretch goal once the kids got to school, where we could review goals and have a getaway and, work on business and have a business trip and go see F1. So
Nah,
we didn't hit the goal though. So I brought it up because she didn't see the calendar yet. And she's like, F1 starts again next week. And I'm like, I know, look at the calendar. And I pulled up my phone and she's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I'm like, yeah, we didn't hit the goal.
I guess it's closer.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll probably get some F1 in, but it would be nice to go to the Netherlands for a week or so while the kids just stay here.
Yeah,
And that's the nice thing, when the kids get older, you can do stuff like that.
I know. But my little one, she already loves F1. So when she hears the vroom, vroom, vroom in the beginning of the race, when they do the formation lap,
Yep.
she's very attentive. I mean, she likes
That's
all.
awesome.
We love sports, watching, playing, doing stuff. We're a very active family. So now it's pretty challenging because it's 115 to 120 every day. But outside of that, we try to be outside as well. Right now, we burn her skin
Yeah.
would be like putting her in the oven, which she's not used to yet. But yeah, we move around. We do our little yoga together. And she observes me. She tries to do some moves her already, so she's getting a good
Wow. That's
habit.
awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah,
Way to go.
starting early for sure. And I'd like to. Always was my dream and goal when I will have kids one day, to be but lead by example and by actually doing it. I didn't like the fact that a lot of, not hating on parents, because I understand sometimes it gets out of hands, but when you tell the kid, hey, don't watch TV, and then the next thing you do, go into another room and you watch TV, or don't play with your iPad or your phone when I'm talking to you, and then you pull up your phone, or while saying this, you are on your phone or your iPad, and you just log in and you're away because you're in this
For
virtual
sure.
world.
For
So
sure.
that's something that I would love to do, and that's why I have books all over the place, and reading whenever I had a second. So I'm reading for her. She's reading her books. I'm reading my books.
That's good.
Upstairs, downstairs.
That's
She
good.
she already loves. So far, she loves eating books, but that's
That's a
Well,
good sign. I mean, she's on the right track. A good
I
sign.
take I take it's the first sign, that first encounter with books. So
That's
it's
right.
colorful, so she eats it, but well, we'll get to the point where she'll read it. But
That's
yeah,
good.
yeah, that's a great advice here. I'll definitely talk about this with my wife, and we'll plan that first trip. Maybe we'll start next year with
Yeah, good.
that whole year zooming out and seeing where we can do this. I love that. So thank you so
You
much
can
for.
get these calendars on Amazon, just get a big year calendar, and it's good to just get it all because then it just gets visual, so you're talking through
Yeah,
things. I take just a bunch of dry erase markers with us, and I just start coloring it in. And I'll sometimes literally just go to the front desk and get their stapler and just like staple it right to the wall, and then it's up there. It's just good to go. So I try to find somewhere where it's not going to do damage, or I'll tape, but whatever. It's
Yeah,
usually
I love it, and we love to get away, even for a day. Sometimes, it's always you're different when you're out, when you travel
for sure.
somewhere.
Yeah,
Absolutely, you're not thinking about all the responsibilities that you have. You still have them, but you don't think about them constantly, right? When you're somewhere
correct.
else, and it unlocks with different depth of your wisdom and knowledge and
Yeah,
opportunity
yeah,
to look at.
sure. Gives you just that different vantage point to see in, and there's a visual that I use within my coaching, that I've got all these gears that, like, it looks like, the gears that are going like this inside of a watch or something. And they're all grayish, bluish in color from this image. And I'll share this image with somebody that I'm going through this thought process with. But one of them is bright red. I'm like, okay, all the blue stuff is okay. We're only going to look at the red one. So imagine plucking that gear out of the whole system. And now we're going to work on that gear. And that came out of a book called Work the System by Sam Carpenter, which is fantastic if you're trying to work on systems. And that idea of just grabbing something and just like snatching it out of the business and now working on it here. So you're not looking at the whole, you're just looking at this one thing. How can we make this better? And then you can stick it right back into the business. So if any of these ideas, like if there's any founders or entrepreneurs in that kind of a range that are feeling like these are issues that they're struggling through or trying to deal with right now, like, just DM me on Instagram. I've got something called a Founder Freedom Playbook that taps into the first parts of some of these processes that'll give you some tools. And I'm trying to grow my followers. I'm trying to get to 50,000 followers. So that's all I ask for. Follow me, and I can give you any of the playbooks we have. But just send me a DM, and I'm happy to share, whether it's on LinkedIn or Instagram, whatever.
I will make sure to leave the contact information on LinkedIn and Instagram right below the title, so they can easily get
Okay.
access to that and will hopefully drive some traffic. Plus, we're going to promote it on LinkedIn. I'm mostly building my audience right now on LinkedIn. That's my focus. I know
Yeah.
that coaching is probably better on Instagram space for sure. And I've been spending quite a lot of time doing content for Instagram and TikTok actually, because these two work
Mhm.
in similar ways now. But yeah, for now, focus for us is Instagram. But I love I'm sorry, LinkedIn. But I love Instagram for that reason. I love Instagram funnels. That's most fascinating to me. I mean, I think with ManyChat, with the way the things you can do with things like ManyChat, building those funnels with lead magnets, like you said, giving really valuable assets to your audience, to your followers, and helping them overcome certain challenges up front without asking anything in exchange. It's gonna drive your following, and then you can start monetizing and also running ads. Instagram ads are still probably in any industry out there, any business, whether it's a startup or a billion dollar business. Facebook facebook has so much data. Their algorithm is so good. It's
Mhm.
ridiculous when it comes to scaling to pay more about us than we know about ourselves. Sometimes I feel like. But Justin, wrapping up here slowly, it's been an hour, feels like 10 minutes. So it's a
Yeah,
good
good. It's
conversation.
been fun. Yeah, for sure.
What's the most fulfilling for you when it comes to coaching others?
Just seeing that unlock, just seeing, like, fighting up against a fixed belief, a fixed mindset. And a lot of times we argue for it. The other day, I was talking to a guy, and he said, I've already delegated what I can. Everything else requires me. And he's doing okay. He's doing about $1.5 million in this company that he's running. And that's okay. He's not, his profit margins are pretty slim. And he's like, so there's really not much more that we could really do here. I don't think there's any. And I'm like, really? I said, well, do you know anybody else that runs that kind of business? And filled in the blank. Like, do you know anybody else around, like, within 500 miles? And he's like, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, of course. I said, are any of them doing 10 million? He's like, yeah, probably. I'm like, okay. So why? And he went, oh, whoa. Like, he just didn't know how to think outside of this box. To him, he was like, I don't want more work. I don't want to be more. I don't want, and that's what I was talking to him about. It wasn't necessarily about growth as much as it was about freedom. He wanted to get a day off. He wanted to be able to take a week holiday, And so he wasn't thinking about growth, but when he started to change the frame, like I could just see it wash over his face. He's like, yeah, what am I doing? And like, those are the kind of things where now this whole thing goes like this. And now this is what's the minimum acceptable. And this is what becomes possible. And what's cool is I think these things go on forever. It's my belief that God plants inside of our hearts the desires that we have. And if we follow those desires, like even the ones to make money, even the ones to have abundance and to be fit and to be strong and healthy, like I think those come from our maker. And if we follow them and if we learn how, like I think that's our path for improvement. And I think that's what God wants us to do is to improve ourselves, to improve our fellow man and woman and our children, and to just, I keep learning and growing every day. So that's what I love about coaching is I get to see that on a daily basis. And we deal with these challenging beliefs and different thoughts that try to keep us small and try to keep us limited. And then next week they show up and it's like, I did this and this worked and I got all this thing in it. And it's like, yeah, that's cool. That's what I'm talking about. That's what's great. You're growing, and it really is true. You're growing or you're dying. You don't get to stand still. You're moving up or you're moving down. You don't get to stagnate. So if you think you're stagnating, you're really going backwards and you just haven't confronted that yet. So
Yeah. And I've learned it the hard way, so I can testify to that. It's absolutely true. You need to be
yeah,
growing at
me too.
all. Yeah, I know. You you headed to the next level lesson right there. We all should be glad that you figure it out, so you can tell us how not to
Yeah.
do that. So you
Don't do it
can,
like that. Yeah, that's for
yeah,
sure.
avoid those traps here. Yeah, but that's absolutely, yeah. I'm with you on that. Seeing that unlock, it's always, and
Mhm.
there's so much more out there. I mean, I'm actually putting my laptop on two David Ogilvy's books. So if ever any of your clients on the agency space is hitting that ceiling or that can think out of the box, I
Mhm.
recommend sharing any of his books. I think I have 4 or 5 around the house here.
Okay.
And the reason why I bring it up is when you look up Ogilvy, you don't really see them on LinkedIn, Instagram. Now LinkedIn, they're started creating content on LinkedIn, and they're essentially bragging about the clients that they bring on, which are, Coca-Cola, Verizon, major companies. But what I'm trying to say is if you look up Ogilvy revenue, you'll see that his agency, even though he passed away, I think in the 80s, 70s, maybe 80, something like that, he's built such an agency or such a business that is now bringing in around I'm sorry, $6 to $7 billion in revenue as a marketing agency. I think right now, probably nearing a century in operation. And his books that he wrote in the 60s and 50s, or I might be mixing out the dates here, but a
Yeah.
long time ago,
Yeah.
are still generating freaking leads for them, for the company. And
Yep.
he talks about in the book actually that he's writing. You read a book and he's telling you that he's actually writing this book as a lead magnet so you can become his client if you're big enough.
Yeah.
And it's working, right? So the god of copywriting marketing, he's such a great CEO. He was one of the favorite CEO from Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, who I believe they never got to work with actually, but they just
Oh.
love. They met him. I'm pretty sure they met him, but they admire the way he approaches business in general. So there's great lessons from him, and there's, you think about next ceiling and your ceiling, current ceiling, and that there's nothing above that ceiling, then you can still build a skyscraper on top of that foundation that you've built. So it's, sky's the limit. I'm not saying growth at all costs, because I think it's having a good healthy balance is
Yeah,
important
but
for
you got to remember what Michelangelo said back in when was he
15th
alive?
century.
100? Yeah, I think that the greater danger is not that our hopes are too great and we fail to reach them. It's that they're too low and we do. And that's the biggest limitation that many people run into is just not knowing how to think bigger, not knowing how to dream a bigger dream, not knowing how to set a bigger goal because we want to know how. And so we think of something and we don't know the exact how, and then we just stop thinking. That's our default because, like you said, like that woolly mammoth you have sitting on your desk, we're trained to stay safe. We're trained to have that's what our biology tries to keep us. And so, if we have a dream or a thought, the next thing that comes is how? How am I going to do that? and it shouldn't be. You got to stay with the what for a while, and you got to excavate that from the inside. Like, what really lights you up? What really is your purpose? What could you get excited about? And then I go to who. Who else has done that? Before I go to how, who? Because if there's somebody else out there in the world that's achieved that thing, that does the thing that I'm thinking that might be possible, might sound kind of cool, but somebody else is doing it, that's proof positive it can be done. So then I can just say, well, what did they do? Not what are they doing now? What did they do to get there? And if I can start to extract some of those details, the how starts to fill in, like the puzzle pieces start to move. And that's through some of the goal setting techniques and frameworks that I work through my clients with is you got to break it down differently, and you have to start putting those pieces together in a way that ultimately satisfies your brain, because your brain does want closure and it wants clarity. But if you can avoid it jumping and defaulting to the how right off the gate, like right out of the bat, then you can sit with the what, you can go to the who, you start to work backwards from this bigger picture and this vision that I always recommend starting 20 years down the road. So it's you get way down there where your kid is now 20 and you're thinking, wow, she's in college. That's the picture you start creating, because it's just fun. Then it's kind of a fantasy. And then you come back to present day and you go to the who, and that's how the pieces of the puzzle of how start to become visible. And you unlock resources that otherwise your brain just says, nope, this is where we stay safe. This is what we know. This is where our comfort zone is, you know? Anyway, I love it. I
No,
love it.
it's yeah, definitely the right approach, and there's a reason why we mentioned a lot of books on the podcast today, but there's this that Champion's Mind book. I forgot the author, but he was, I believe, coach to Michael Phelps and a bunch of other people. Great book. There's really one or two chapters that I reread rather than rereading the whole book. I like rereading stuff. So they're about mindset, visualization, and goal setting. And the thing I'm trying to bring up here is that there is a reason why a guy who is a gold medalist, guys that win NBAs, baseball, soccer, all the sports that they have at this level, bunch of coaches, not one, not two. They have a
Yeah.
whole crew of coaches, nutritionists, mindset coaches. Mindset coaching becomes very, very popular now in sports. It wasn't the case because you assume that they have such a strong mindset. These athletes, there's a reason why they're athletes. They're called athletes, right? But I mean, a lot of them are not handling the pressure that they're exposed to by themselves. So they need help. They need support. So yeah, even at this level, but it goes down to even the simple stuff like they train every day. Every day they have multiple coaches that show them. For me, I mean, my sport is soccer. So
Mhm.
how to pass the ball and what they do when you see them practicing. They freaking pass the ball all the time. Obviously, they're much better, but they're constantly doing the same basics, foundations, and they never stop doing those foundations and basics. There's bunch of examples for that, and I'm glad that we live in a times where we get access to that knowledge and that information,
Yeah,
and you can do with this information whatever you want to do. You
for
can
sure.
either ignore it, apply it, or just be entertained by it. But that's definitely the way to go
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, I love that. And on the closing comments of the athletes and the professionals, there's something that I just read that the amateur is somebody who practices until they get it right. The professional is one who practices until they can't get it wrong. And that's why you see drill and drill and drill those foundation fundamental things again and again until getting it wrong just isn't even they don't even know how anymore, So
Yeah.
where are you gonna stop? Are you gonna stop when you get it right once? Or are you gonna stop once you no longer ever get it wrong?
I love it. Yeah, and every time we have tennis tournament here in Indian Wells, and we go and see the players and see them train or the games, the training element is like you said it. They train it to the point when you watch a game, you think like, how in the world are they always hitting the ball where they want to? Like how? And that's exactly to your point. Like during the training, they train it so much, so often, even if you're best number one, current number one, that you pretty much can't get it wrong. It's that that's the principle here. Love that. Well, last question for you. If you had an opportunity to sit across the table from the young version of Justin, what advice would you have for him, setting him up for success and maybe even success and the downs as well, but helping him actually go through them faster, do the failures faster, so he can reach the success much faster.
Yeah, I would say that the main thing is you don't have to be the expert to start. And by that I mean there's been times that I haven't taken any action to progress toward anything because I felt like I was just too far outside of my zone, my lane, like taxes, like financials, like numbers. So instead of just trying to understand a little bit, I was just like, nah, and I just avoided it. So don't avoid, just recognize that it's okay if you understand 1% more than you did last year, but don't settle for being the same because that's a bad, I think it was, is it the Tour de France, the cycling team, they adopted this 1%, they, instead of trying to figure out like all these things they could do to win the race. And I think it was with Lance Armstrong. I don't know if I'm getting the details right, but they started looking at everything instead of just one or two really big things that they could train, everything. They began to dust the trailer because there was the idea that in the trailer, if we have dust on our brakes and we have dust in the gears, so we're going to dust the trailer every single day to where our bikes are in there. And so if they could get 1% gains across all of these areas, would it add up? And sure enough, 1% better pillow made for a better night's sleep. So they were more rested. Like literally, these were the things that they were changing, just little micro movements. And so many times we get caught in these ruts that are our expertise, our specialty. And that's where we feel like we can poke out our chest and like, this is my area of expertise. So the other things where we're not as strong, we feel like we got to avoid. And I would tell my young, dumb self, don't avoid them. Just get a little better. You can still have an area where you're the best and go be the best. But just don't be scared of the areas where you're not the best. Just get a little bit better. Diversify your knowledge, but go deep in one and then bring some skills into the other. That's the number one thing I would say.
Kaizen philosophy comes to mind, making small changes, incremental changes, improvements, or can I rule from Tony Robbins? It's wild, but his coaching goes or training and all that. Tony Robbins persona goes back to the 80s. I mean, it's been 50 years that he's
Yeah.
been doing that. Yeah, it's wild. So the circle closes here. Listen, it's been absolute pleasure and honor to host you. I've
Yeah.
learned so much. I had my brain is already spinning in so many directions. I need to settle down. Yeah, go and pitch my partner on the
All
new
right. Good luck.
strategy I'm going to implement.
All
Yeah, I
right.
can't wait to do that.
Pick out a
Like I
fun place where she wants to go first. That's the best idea. Like if you pick out a spot where she wants to go and then you get easy buy-in. That's what I did. So it's like, yeah, I'll go there. Yeah. So
I love that. Yeah, another lesson for me, valuable lesson for me. Happy wife, happy life, and
that's
those who are
right.
married know that. I'll make sure to leave all the contact information down below. Yeah, hopefully people can check out your coaching and your Instagram and get value from it, like I did. Thank you so much for your
Cool.
time today.
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. It's been fun.